Welcome to the Live Well, Perform Better podcast. My name is David Duggan, and I'm the director of Below the Line, an Irish-based consultancy specialising in helping people, teams and organisations raise their levels of consciousness, inner potential and performance. I am part of a team made up of experts from the worlds of business, elite sport, adventure and health and well-being. We are coaches, mentors and advisors to some of the world's biggest companies and organisations, as well as smaller businesses, entrepreneurs and people looking to make their mark in the world. Our guiding mantra at Below the Line is live well, perform better. What does that mean, you might ask? Good question. Maybe the easiest way to describe it from our perspective is finding the formula that works for you when it comes to things like looking after your physical and mental health, running your business, developing your career, leading your people, or simply being able to show up as brilliantly as possible into your own life, both for yourself and those around you. That's why each week I sit down with a member of our team or an invited guest for a conversation that focuses on the question, what do the words live well, perform better mean to you? This question is a way into exploring with people from a range of different backgrounds, industries and disciplines. What are the practices, techniques, habits or ideas that they use to help them to show up and be at their best in all areas of their lives? Whether that's as CEOs, leaders or managers, or as parents, family members or friends. We keep it short and sweet so that you can extract all the good stuff and get on with the rest of your day and hopefully put some of our knowledge, experience and expertise into play for yourself. This week I'm delighted to welcome back another very special guest, Paul Gleeson. For those of you familiar with Below the Line, you will know that Paul is a founding member of the team, who, as a possessor of an adventurous spirit, has undertaken and completed some amazing feats of human endurance, which include cycling across Australia, rowing the Atlantic Ocean, and exploring the far reaches of the Arctic. In a slight change from our normal format, I asked Paul to sit down with me to tell me about his latest adventure, which involved leading an expedition to climb Mont Blanc, the highest mountain in the Alps and Western Europe, earlier this year. What follows is a conversation in which we explored where the inspiration for this particular expedition came from, what was involved in preparing for it, the personal challenges Paul overcame on the trip, as well as the lessons that we can all take from an experience like scaling a mountain and bring back and apply in our everyday lives and work. Huge thanks to Paul for taking the time to do this, and we hope you enjoy this one. You can subscribe at www.belowtheline.ie, where you can stay up to date with our podcast as well as our exclusive online events and sessions, including our Press Pause coaching community. Thanks for listening and see you next week. Before we start this week's episode, I'd like to take a minute to let you know about the next in-person event we are hosting on the 2nd and 3rd of March 2023 in the beautiful Brook Lodge Hotel and Spa in Macredon Village, County Wicklow. Our first Elemental Leadership experience took place earlier in October 2022, and it went so well that we decided to do it all again. As we all know, the past few years have been a mixed experience for us all. For some, it has been about stress management, coping and surviving, both personally and professionally, while for others, it has been a time for recovery, reflection and self-care. Either way, we all know and can see that yet again our world is changing, and with it, so must our mindset, our attitude and our energy, which is why we're offering you the opportunity to recharge your leadership, rediscover your performance edge, and re-inspire yourself to successfully meet the moment and challenge of right now. At the Elemental Leadership Experience, you will be a participant in 2 days of inspiring sessions, workshops and talks, facilitated by the Below the Line team of expert business and performance coaches, all while enjoying wonderful accommodation and hospitality in a beautiful part of the world, with a group of like-minded, success-orientated people. Places are limited, so if this sounds like something you want to be a part of, head over to www.belowtheline.ie for full details on how you can reserve your place and avail of our early bird rate, an offer which extends until the 1st of December 2022. Thanks for listening, and now on with the show. Right, well look, we'll kick off. So I suppose, Paul, I've invited you on. Look, obviously you're a member of the Below the Line team and a colleague and a pal and all the rest, and I'm taking a slightly different tack than our usual format on the podcast here, because you have earlier on this year done another one of your adventure treks up, and this time it was to Mont Blanc. And I wanted to just ask you about that, for my own curiosity, and because hopefully a few people listening to this might kind of be suitably interested in finding out about the trip. So maybe the best place to start is, what motivates you to take on what motivated you to take on this particular challenge earlier on this year?
Yeah. Good to be on again, Dave. I guess we were chatting a couple of minutes before, off air before we started this, and one of the things that you said to me was that, I like the way you go off doing these different trips or expeditions, and you sort of bring something back, I guess, for myself and also in the work that we do with clients. And believe it or not, that was pretty much where the idea for Mont Blanc came from. So lots of people will know Mont Blanc. It's the highest mountain in Western Europe. It's it's 4,800 meters in the French Alps, and it's a mountain that's very, very climbable. Lots of people do it every year. It does require an element of acclimatization and an element of technical mountaineering. It's at the lower end of the technical scale, but nonetheless, you do need to have some technical skills and learning in there. But the idea for it originally was, going back to last year, I guess I wanted other people to experience the benefits of taking on an adventure trip. So, to your point about not just for doing and the whole experience of preparing and doing a trip like this, but also to use that as I guess, as a learning arena for what they might learn about themselves, what they can learn about life, what they can learn from the whole experience, and bring that back into their own lives at a personal and a professional level. So I put it out to a couple of people, a couple of clients, and we put a team of 6 together. So over the course of about 6 months, we prepared to climb Mont Blanc, which involved going over to Scotland, doing some training a long weekend over in the Scottish Highlands, and training together in Dublin, individually, as well as training as a team. And what we did as part of that then was, we said, okay, we've set our sights on summiting Mont Blanc. We'll have a week over in France when the time to do the trip comes around, about 9 days actually to do it. And over the prep time, we said, well, what do our summits look like away from the mountain? So what are our summits like in real life? What are the things that we want to be experiencing? Are there tweaks or changes we want to make? Are there certain outcomes or goals that we're pursuing? So I guess I layered the coaching work into the whole experience of training and preparing for it. And when we got over there, and we'll circle around and in and out of this, but I guess one of the conversations that was one of the highlights for me was, when you do Mont Blanc, it's a 2-day push to the actual summit. So the first 5-6 days over there, you're climbing different ridges, and you're getting used to the altitude, and you're sort of working on your technical skills and getting used to a bit of exposure as well. We'll come back to that in a while if you want. But when we finished the climb and we managed to make the summit, and we were coming back down, and we were having a conversation, 3 of us there, and 2 of the guys, one of the guys said to the other, God, like, when you think about what we've just done, like, any of the challenges we have in life, sure, they're nothing. They're a piece of insert the word. And I just said to them, and they both agreed on this, and I lit up. I said, guys, that's exactly why I wanted to not just do this myself, but to try and put a team together, and we do it. Because when people experience something like that, that's one of the fundamental things they can take from it, is to go, wow, I've put myself in really out of my comfort zone, and I've experienced some anxiety, I've experienced a challenge physically, mentally, emotionally. And I think you find more of what's in yourself when you do something like that. And definitely, to me, it evolves your perspective, so you can bring that back with you. So that was, I guess, that was the motivation behind the trip. And when we got back, I said to the guys, let's continue this experience. I hadn't planned this for another couple of months, where we'll do some reflection work together on integrating what we've learned from this, and about, you know, building on, I guess, some of the intentions and some of the work that we've done earlier. So I guess it's evolved. You know, I sort of put, I guess, a title on this as, you know, the expedition mindset experience. But the, you know, it'll turn out to be, I guess, the guts of 12 months of work that we get to do together. And I say work, I mean, it's everything we've done together with the team has been in the outdoors and up the mountains and outside for a lot of it. Even in terms of the coaching work, there's been a real, I guess, experiential flavor to it.
You mentioned a 6-month preparation period. I'm just wondering, physically, mentally, what were some of the things that went into that preparation for anyone, again, listening to this and thinking, gosh, I'd love to take something like this on. Where does one go about starting?
Yeah, I think the first thing I'd say is that for most of these types of trips, yeah, you've got to be physically fit and you've got to put the work in. I think when you put the work in, it makes the experience more enjoyable, you know. So I guess the way I would say anyone listening to this, if someone has an interest or a draw to take on some form of a challenge, whatever it may be, I just say back yourself, because with the right preparation and planning, 100%, in my belief, you can do it. So I guess what we did, we started off with different chunks. The first sort of 5-6 weeks, personally, I had a couple of little niggles physically that I wanted to iron out and I needed to iron out. So we did a bit of sort of a little bit of base work. Everybody had a level of fitness in them. I just encourage people to look, if you've got any niggles in joints, get them checked out, because when you're up on a mountain, if you're carrying weight on your pack, the mountain will find any imbalance or any sort of weaknesses that might be there. So the first thing, whether it was alignment, whether it was soft tissue, whether it was ligaments, tendons, you know, for me, I had a little bit of my hip that I wanted to develop, just in terms of balance between my left and my right side, in terms of some of the ligaments and tendons and stuff. So worked with a physio over a period of about 6 weeks. So then we eased into it that way. Everybody was doing their own physical preparation. Then what we did was we sort of started to train together. So we would do night hikes during the week, where we'd always go out with a pack, like invariably half the pack was filled with wood, to simulate the weight of what we would be carrying. So, and also just at nighttime, like some of the local hills and stuff that we went up, you know, when it gets foggy and it gets a bit windier, what can be very apparent is not very apparent. So it was getting used to just uncomfortable, you know, sort of wet, windy situations, which wasn't going to necessarily replicate what we were going to have on Mont Blanc, but just, I guess, from a mindset perspective, and just being up in the dark, because we would have been out early in the day of the summit push. We would have been hiking in the dark. So getting some comfort with that. I remember actually one of the earlier days, myself and one of the guys, Tomas, we were up Tignock. So we weren't, you know, far remote or anything, but we both had 2 fairly decent sized rucksacks packed with wood, and it was quite windy and we were sort of getting blown over a bit up towards the top. I remember saying to Tomas, I was like, actually, do you know what? We've nothing of practical use in this bag if one of us gets injured. But even just that alone was a little bit of, okay, let's just, you know, let's keep thinking about what we're doing. And then I guess we sort of upped it. We went over to the Scottish Highlands. We trained with a climbing company over there to get certain skill, you know, getting used to being on ice, using crampons, using our ice axe, looking at belaying, looking about how we rope up together. When you travel across a glacier, you know, you do need to be roped up properly and looking out for certain things. So that was important. And then we also did a lot of indoor rock climbing, which was really, apart from being great fun, we went into it's a great climbing facility called Awesome Walls, just off the Finglas entrance there, or Finglas exit on the M50. Fantastic place. But that allowed everyone, again, getting comfortable with being in a harness and just having some exposure to a bit of height, you know, and the sensation of climbing and moving the body in that way. We then did work together then as a team, I guess, with looking at what do we want to get out of this experience and why is this important to all of us individually? What's going to make this, you know, a really meaningful experience to us, and what do we want from the journey of this. I think in the past, I nearly would have been a little bit apologetic about using that cliche, oh, the journey, what do we want to get out of it? But I'm just not apologetic for it anymore, because it is about the journey. Whether it's overly used or not, I just don't care, because the experience of, you could climb a summit, or you could build a business up, or you could do various different things. But if you haven't enjoyed the journey of it, for me, I'm like, what's the point? So there was a lot of that work that we did together then. So I guess it all sort of came into, we did some visualization work as well, where, the work that we did was physical, mental, and emotional. I think, there was different dimensions to it in terms of how we prepped, but it was just so much fun. Like, I remember the night before, or the week before we were going to leave, I had the team over, the guys over in my house, and we had a little fire pit outside and a couple of beers and a meal, and just getting us together before we left. And one of the guys commented, he's like, regardless of what happens over here, I've had a great time already, 6 months. So there was just, even from a team perspective, like, I think if we were an intact team in a company, for example, like, after an experience like that, there's nothing you wouldn't do together. There's nothing, you would just radically change how you are, because you've just experienced something a bit special with each other, and you've experienced highs and lows, obviously, as part of that.
One of the things you said to me in the past about some of the other trips and adventure things that you've done is that they were mental challenges, probably more so than they were physical challenges. Would this fall into that bracket as well, or what would you think?
Yeah, I think maybe to a lesser extent. I think, no, that's actually it's probably not fair to say. I think, yeah, it is, where I'd see this as being quite a mental and emotional challenge, was, first of all, I guess, committing to it, because a lot of us, myself included, we didn't necessarily know, because we were starting off really from scratch in terms of mountaineering experience. Like, we've all hiked up mountains, but we were starting from scratch at that point. So I think it's committing to something where you don't know what's going to happen, and you don't necessarily know the amounts of what's involved. That's a mental piece too, and an emotional piece. And I think the emotional piece is around, to what degree can you emotionally handle the discomfort of being outside your comfort zone, and also the amount of uncertainty and change and unknown that's going to be in there. I think that can sometimes put people off lots of things in life. So I also think, as it got closer, and when we went we were up in Scotland, like, we had 4 days in the Highlands. It pretty much rained and snowed, probably more rain than snowed higher up for the 4 days we were there. So there's a little bit of, it's not that you physically need to be in a certain place, maybe to a point you do, but it's just mentally getting used to the the misery or the discomfort of some of that as well. And having said that, in the same breath, it was great crack too, doing it all together. So that was a piece. And I do think then the mental side, when we got over there and we arrived into Chamonix and we spent the night there, I partnered obviously with an expedition, a guiding company, to do mountaineering company. So we had 3 professional guides with us, who were instructing us on various different things and building on what we'd done in Scotland. But when we went up the first 4 days, and we're up climbing different ridges, or arêtes as they call them, over there, like, the exposure that we ended up getting was, you're going up some vertical stuff. You're roped in, but I came across an image the other day, and I don't know, it's a couple of 100-foot drop below you, pretty much, if you fall, you're gone. But you're roped up, and it's very, very well done and safe, paramount. But that, I guess, every day, like, we'd get to, maybe a new hut where we were going to stay, and you're literally climbing into some of these huts off the ridge. So they're huts are sort of on the ridge. It's really well done. But then we climb over onto this thing, and we're like, wow, look what we just did. So definitely the mental and emotional piece there, in terms of handling yourself on, some pretty exposed stuff for us, that was a very significant part of it, which again, I think transcends back into everyday life for lots of us, how we handle ourselves emotionally and mentally in maybe stressful situations, or challenging situations, or opportunity that might be in front of us but might involve uncertainty in it.
What you're talking about there, you can turn around and physically look down at how far you've come and go, wow, and give yourself a pat on the back, and that gives you a boost. And so many people in life, whether it's their own career or their families or their business or whatever it might be, we tend not often to look back and say, wow, look how far I've come. We can often look at it and go, oh, I'm not farther along enough, but you're physically seeing what you're doing and kind of going, wow. And I think if an awful lot of us could do that, we'd probably just give ourselves that pat on the back a little bit more often, or that nod of, or word of encouragement, or say, keep going, or fair play.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know this, David, as well as I do, like with coaching, is that often in the work that we do, that's part of what you're doing, is you're encouraging people to tap into the experience and the wisdom that they have, so that they can use that in a way that's relevant for them. And I think, I give you a real practical example. The night before the summit push, so we gone the first day, we were in one hut, and the next day we were going to leave at about 4 a.m. And it would have been, it turned out to be a 14-hour round trip day to summit and get back down again. And it was always going to be weather dependent. So the conditions the night before with the forecast, the wind were a fair bit stronger than what was forecasted. So we knew, look, we'll set off, we'll see how things go. Because with lots of trips, you have a forecast, and then you got to assess what's actually happening around you as well. So when we left, like the night before, it was like you could see the nervous energy, amongst everyone, myself included, the mixture of nerves and excitement, and the physiology, and the physiology of excitement and anxiety are pretty much identical. It's just a different emotional lens that we're viewing something through. So if I get really anxious about something, and then there's also part of me that's really excited about it. It was like, before a big game, because I guess, joking aside, this was the serious piece that we had arrived at. Not the serious piece, but it was the summit piece. So I was sitting, I had these little booklets. I'm just showing it to you here. People won't necessarily see it, but everyone had one of these little diaries with them that we had done up in advance. And when I go on trips, I'll often journal different things, just ideas, thoughts, stuff that maybe if I don't write it down, won't necessarily stick with me post-trip. And one of the things that I was doing that night was just thinking about 3 words to describe how I want to show up into this summit day tomorrow. And the 3 words that I had were be calm, be determined, and be courageous. So for me, calm was just being, okay, if you get to certain ridges and there's a bit of exposure, just focus on my breathing, focus on my steps, just keep doing forget about looking at the exposure, and just stay calm and use my breath. The courageous piece was around, as I get higher and higher, if I do experience altitude sickness, or if I do experience that, I guess, the fear or the worry around any exposure, it's just come back to just be courageous, just bring this out in you, and just focus on that, and just do your absolute best. You're with the team, you're with the guys, keep doing that over and over again. And then the determined piece was more around, I could imagine, as you get higher and higher and the air gets thinner, we were all fit, but you're fighting, and it's a slog. It is a slog. So just keep those 3 words in my mind and know what they mean, and forget about the outcome then. It was like the outcome will be whatever it'll be, but just bring, I guess, all of me and the best of me into this situation tomorrow. So that was, a practical example, maybe in terms of the mental and emotional side. And again, from chats that we've had over the years, that's a very simple practice that's very translatable into a day-to-day. I do it pretty much every day now. I just think about part of my own compass setting, as we do, is think about, right, how do I want to be today? How do I want to show up today? Thinking about my day ahead. And different days will require maybe different things. Some days maybe, I want to be decisive today. Some days maybe being really present is particularly important for whatever reason, et cetera, et cetera. So it's whatever that sort of is. And that was, I guess, in that particular instance, you're sitting in darkness in the hut doing this and feeling the emotions you're feeling. And it's one thing to do it, but I think because it's so simple and easy, I can refer back to it. And I did refer back to it throughout the summit.
You mentioned it earlier, and it's something that you're currently working on a book on, but the expedition mindset, which I have said to you, I've just been very taken by as a way of looking at the world, particularly at a time when I'm talking to you and we're facing into all sorts of potentially challenging times with the winter and an energy crisis and war in Ukraine, etc. Just could you talk to me about the expedition mindset a little bit and explain it for people listening, and maybe how did that help or manifest on the expedition?
Yeah, it's something that I guess probably, I won't say it came to me, but I started to sort of lean into this about 2 years ago, towards the earlier part of COVID. And I guess, the point we were talking about earlier on, where as coaches, when we work with people, we're trying to encourage people to tap into their own genius, their own experience, their own wisdom, all the good stuff that they have. It's just a matter of bringing that out. So I guess I was turning that mirror on myself, in particular at the start of COVID, when, lots of businesses, ourselves being a business that was 100% in person before COVID, it was like, right, shit, what do we do now? So there was lots of that going on for us and for lots of other people, of course. So I guess when I turned that reflection mirror on myself, I thought about what I've learned from adventure trips and expeditions over the years. And one of the beautiful things with, if I think of a big expedition, so whether it's, some of the Arctic trips or the Atlantic or any, Australia, is you get a very clear picture of what you're trying to do. You've got a really strong vision that you connect with emotionally around what does success look like? What's meaningful for you? Not just as an outcome or an end point, but the whole journey along to it. And when you break down an expedition, you've clarity on that. You've clarity on then what do I need to do to prepare and to do this? When I'm out there on the trip, what are the things and the tools I'm going to need in terms of dealing with fear and stress and uncertainty and change? So I thought to myself, a mindset of what I've now called the expedition mindset is really appreciating that, like for us, in my opinion, life is just a series of expeditions that we go on. So you and I were talking beforehand, we've just moved to Kinsale. There's a whole little mini expedition over the past, 6 months or a year, going a little journey that we're on as a family. And, now there'll be another one and another one and another one. So for me, it's a mindset that you can bring. And a key part of that mindset for me is around understanding that, yeah, like some of what you've mentioned with the energy crisis, Brexit, the war, et cetera, all the various different things that are happening, there's going to be probably something else and something else and something else. So part of an expedition mindset is like, well, when I go out in an ocean, of course I'm going to get hit by storms. That's what happens in an ocean. So it's nearly going out, not that you're looking for difficult things on a journey, but they're going to happen. So accept them and prepare for them. And I think by doing that, you're less ruffled when things go sideways. And I guess if I think about an expedition mindset, and this is, I guess, what I'm writing the book on, is sort of 3 parts. The first one is exploring within yourself. So it's looking at, well, where am I right now? What's my starting point in terms of where I want to get to? And part of your starting point, which is the first chapter of this, or the second chapter of the book, is around connecting the dots and understanding. You mentioned this earlier about people maybe giving themselves a pat on the back for what they've done and for progress they've made on different things. So part of understanding, exploring within, part of your starting point is also your mindset. It's how you look on your situation, how you look on the world. And that's informed and shaped in part by the experiences that we've had. So part of that exploring within is exploring a little bit of your journey to date and understanding, and there's ways and means in the book obviously to do this, but it's understanding what's impacted me in terms of how I see the world and my own perspective on different things. Is that useful? Do I want to change my narrative around some of that? So the exploring within is looking at that. It's looking at the whole area of mental fitness and agility. It's understanding, the elements of my soul, what's fueling me, what's unique to David Duggan. If I think of how incredibly gifted and talented you are in music and all that you do there, and that feeds an element of your soul. Part of the exploring within for an expedition mindset is also knowing, well, what nourishes my soul? So what are the journeys I want to go on? What are the things maybe that are going to be important to me moving forward? So that exploring within is a big part of it. And then you're looking at sort of, I guess, embarking on your journey. So you're looking at, well, what's meaningful in terms of where I want to go, what I want to do, why does that matter to me? And that's a real thing with when you go on a trip, I guess, and you just, the mindset, the expedition mindset, to me, it's more than just a frame of mind, but it's something that energetically changes you. You're so connected and you're excited, you're passionate about it. And I'm not suggesting everything that we might do in sort of quote unquote our day-to-day lives might be as exciting, for me at least, in terms of doing an expedition. But there's definitely lots of connection points that I can have that will fuel it. So it's looking at embarking on the journey. What does that meaningful vision look like? What are the skills I need? What is the prep and everything I need to do? But a big part of that is also to what degree do I need to reduce my emotional attachment to what other people think? And I think sometimes, and I include myself in this because I've walked this path, we can have a strong emotional attachment to what other people think. And that can influence the choices that we make consciously and unconsciously. So it's not that you just let go of that. I'm not suggesting someone goes, I don't care what anyone else thinks. But it's more, can I just reduce that emotional attachment? And if I can reduce that emotional attachment to what other people think, it frees you up a little bit more to go, okay, now what do I want? What do I want in my life? And it might be different. I mean, we've shared like stories of this before, notably when I've done particularly some of the bigger trips, and my family understandably not happy about it. And I guess that's a road that I've walked to sort of loosen that grip of emotional attachment, because if I hadn't, I wouldn't have done some of those things. I know my mother would probably be delighted, if I hadn't have done them, but I wouldn't have been doing them because I would have been worried about what my family think or me hurting them. And that emotional attachment could be things like that. It can be fear of what other people think. It can be fear of failure, fear of judgment. So again, it may be relevant for people. It may be less relevant for lots of people. It's just, that's a part of that embarking on the journey, is, I guess, freeing yourself up to take the journey that you want. And then the sort of third part so if you think about the exploring within, you're sort of embarking on your journey. And then the third part is sort of when you're in the arena, you're in the cut and thrust of your journey, is things like guarding your airspace, your emotional airspace. So being careful and being conscious about what you let into your airspace. So to people in your life, people you listen to, what you tune into in terms of news, in terms of media, et cetera, et cetera. And then you get into some of the tools and techniques around, God, I want to go outside my comfort zone on this. How do I get there? How do I do that? How do I navigate change and uncertainty? So there's lots, I guess, in that. But that's a maybe a slightly long-winded or a brief version.
I think the other thing that I've been struck by, you mentioned emotional attachment there, to maybe what other people think of you, etc. But I think the other powerful part of this idea of having an expedition mindset is, as human beings, we're hardwired to want and expect and to be comfortable with certainty. We like knowing what's going to happen. We like knowing that we're going to be safe, and we don't like it when war breaks out or inflation goes up and that type of stuff, and it knocks us off balance and it bends us out of shape and it creates stress in us. And I think what I'm hearing from you is, an expedition mindset is hopefully just designed to help you loosen that connection, if you like, between the need for the need for certainty versus living and being a little bit more comfortable in uncertainty, by getting you to do two things. First of all, make you aware of that and just kind of help you unhook that kind of unhealthy link at times. But it's also about, those daily practices and habits and rituals that just help you stay conscious of that hard wiring, if I'm making any sense.
No, absolutely. And it's a really, really good point, David. I think that the daily practices or the weekly rituals, the things that we all do for ourselves, you and I have referred to this before as our DNA, our daily non-negotiables. Like what are the things throughout the course of my day and my week that I do for myself, whether that's exercise, walking the dog, reading a book, meditating, whatever it is that brings not just an element of joy and enjoyment for you, but also that helps with your state of mind, obviously. And they're nearly one of the same. So like if I'm, I mentioned to you before we started, down in Kinsale now, we're swimming in the sea pretty much every day. And I know just that as one little thing, it might only be 10, 15 minutes, but as one practice that I have, and I know that helps me navigate various different things going on in my life at the moment. So I think you're absolutely right that you can break it down to some of these practices that are not the be all and end all. They're part of it, and they're a very important part of it. But I think you're right, that can help then with the acceptance of and unhooking, as you say, from, okay, do you know what? Yeah, there's lots of stuff that isn't certain right now. And there's things that I don't have the answer to. But guess what? Because of maybe my 10 minutes in the sea this morning, I can bring a little bit more ease into that. And I can shift my lens of focus to, yeah, there's lots of things that I don't know. But here's what I do know. I do know I'm healthy. I do know I'm absolutely fortunate to have a healthy and happy family. I do know I get to do work that I enjoy. I do know I have lots of great people in my life. Yes, I also know that there's challenges there, 100%. So it's just the reminding of, I guess, what we do have and the perspective that we do have in our lives. I think that, to your point then, can bring a little bit more ease into that uncertainty piece. That makes sense. Yeah, I think you're right. And it's like if I said to you, or if you said to me, Paul, I can tell you with absolute certainty everything that's going to happen over the next 10 years. So in 2 years this will happen, in 6 months this will happen, etc., etc. If you ask me that, I'd say I don't want to know. I want a bit of unknown in there. Like lots of people, I think, if you ask them, do you want me to tell you everything that will happen? Some people might say yes, but I know a lot of people would say no. Sure, a bit of crack in not knowing as well.
Where you're joining the dots for me as I listen to you is what I referred to earlier about someone like yourself goes off on some of these trips and people kind of go, oh God, I'd never do that, or that's crazy, or whatever it might be. But, you mentioned journaling before you attempted the summit at Mont Blanc, and how that helped you just get through that 14-hour ascent and descent. But that to me is something that absolutely can be brought into somebody's daily practice in a way that works for them on their terms in their own way. And it's like I said, it's just that example for me of the seemingly crazy kind of ideas or trips, but the things that happen on them and the things that you use to get through them are absolutely the things that anybody can be adapting into their own daily habits and practice and lives, at work, leadership, whatever one you want to kind of look at it.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And I think it's like you also, when you, not just even a trip, you don't even have to be on a trip, but like if someone goes out on a run, it's funny, I listen to loads of different things, as I'm sure you do, I know you do as well. But I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast, and he was talking with, I think it was Alex Honnold, the climber who free soloed El Capitan in Yosemite in the States. Remarkable achievement, but I think it was that interview. Anyway, they were chatting about this whole idea of that when you stress yourself, so when you go out and maybe you do a 10K or a 5K, or you go for a swim, or you do a yoga class, whatever it might be, but when you sort of push yourself a little bit, you then come back and you're equipped for other stresses or other challenges. I think you're better resourced because you've sort of pushed yourself a little bit. And maybe you might have been out of breath for a while. Maybe you might have been, stretching in a way that was uncomfortable, but you've experienced at a physical and an emotional level, maybe a bit of discomfort, a bit of stress, and a bit of uncertainty. Obviously, definitely on the trips you have. And I think that goes into your unconscious or your subconscious, your bank, your memory bank. And you go, right, I can call on that. It's a different type maybe of stress or a different type of discomfort. But hey, I'm in an uncomfortable situation now. No problem. Like if I go into a situation that I might be a little bit uncomfortable or unknown, or there's lots of uncertainty there, and I have lots of stuff I can call up. Come here, I was hanging off a wall a couple of weeks ago in the middle of the Alps. Like that was a lot of uncertainty. It's grand, So it's just, I think it's just the conscious reframing of certain situations that we're in that helps with.
You mentioned this kind of trip has extended into some kind of 12-month type of experience for people. But I'm wondering what's next? Do you have another idea or adventure up your sleeve, or how does that going to pan out?
Yeah, I guess it's funny. Like I can say yes and no. I don't necessarily sort of go around looking for, right, what's the next thing. It tends to sort of, this might sound a bit funny to say, it tends to sort of organically happen. And I guess, look, I probably have a radar that is, even at an unconscious level, wondering, I wonder what could be next. So I guess to answer your question, I don't have something in mind right now. I'm looking at a couple of things, potentially for next year. And I don't know whether it's something that I'll go off and do, or whether it's something, sort of do a similar experience with a group or a team. I haven't yet fully landed on that. But I guess, the reality of my world, I was talking to Colette, my wife, the other day, and, I'm following Damien Brown, who's out rowing the North Atlantic at the moment and doing incredible. He's pushing on, I think, 91 days, as at the time we're having this conversation. I think he's just under 400 miles from Galway. So he started off in New York. He's doing phenomenal in what he's doing. But I guess when I was talking to Colette about this, and she was like, oh, would you have a graw for something like that? And I said, well, look, there's a part of me has a graw for these longer trips that are more challenging. And there's a part of me, and a huge part of me, that doesn't, because I'm a dad and we've 2 young kids and I'm a husband. So I guess at the moment, for me anyway, it's about, I'm blessed that Colette knows this is a part of me. Like last year with Mont Blanc, our little one, Thea, was only a couple of months old. Sorry, what I was saying, this year, I'm losing track of time, sleep deprivation. This year, I guess she was 1, Noah was maybe 2.5, and I went off for, 9 days. And I guess Colette knows, she said, look, yeah, take a week, knock yourself out, do something. So I think part of what I'm contemplating, coming back to your question, is, what bit of mischief or what bit of crack could I get up to over a week? And for me, it's more, it's not just about the challenge of the trip, the adventure. I think there's a bit more depth to it now in terms of, what can I learn and how potentially could this benefit other people and through the work that we do. So don't get me wrong, it's there's a self-interest in this. I love doing this, but I guess, like for the example of this year, opening up something like Mont Blanc to 5 or 6 people and say, hey, here's an experience, do you fancy it? I suspect there'll be another version of that will emerge over the next couple of months, but nothing crystal clear just yet.
Yeah. Well, look, the only thing I think that's certain is something's going to be happening. Just don't know what. So watch this space, everyone. So, look, Paul, you've been really generous with your time, and I think for anyone listening to this, there's huge amounts of insight and knowledge and experience that they can be extracting from this, and whether that's trying something like this on their own terms, or just taking some of those simple ideas and applying them to their own lives themselves, their teams, their organization, their leadership. So thanks a million for being so generous with your time and chatting to me this morning.
Not at all, my pleasure. Thanks again for your time too, and doing this. So, really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's conversation. We hope you enjoyed it. If you like what you heard and want to stay in touch with us, then please head over to www.belowtheline.ie to subscribe to our mailing list and to explore our upcoming programs and events, including our Elemental Leadership Experience coming up on the 2nd and 3rd of March 2023. Until next time, take care and thanks for listening.